Okay. Oh, is that new?
I think that's really new, which I
I've never
really
seen
appreciate.
that
It's like
before.
no surreptitious recording. We all
Right,
know. Yeah.
right. Okay. That's new to me. That thing. All right. Well, now without further ado, I'd like to introduce Representative Mulvaney-Stanak, who serves for District 6-2 and is on House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. Emma is an organizer, activist, and mom, and founded a social change strategy consulting business, EMS Strategies, in 2018. And her clients include labor unions, educational equity organizations, municipalities, and school districts. Emma has also served as state chair of the Vermont Progressive Party and a variety of nonprofit boards. I've had the pleasure of knowing Emma for quite a bit now. When I first got involved in the Progressive Party in it's like 2013, I think, and started in Burlington, kind of organizing and volunteering on some different city council campaigns, and then a lieutenant governor campaign. And it's been a pleasure to work with Emma on some different women's issues and other things within the Progressive Party. And I've asked Emma to come talk to us this evening because, well, as many of you know, the session has wrapped up, and kind of just give a little update on some of the stuff that happened during the session, what didn't, what we can do over the summer to kind of keep things going and for January. I know that two very important issues that a lot of the chapter meetings we've talked about are pensions. I know that's very important to Josh, and unemployment has been very important to me. I attend our South Burlington legislative forums every month, and this last one we had on Monday brought up some of the economic development challenges that we're having in the state right now with our workforce, and you know, friends who are still struggling. So no better person to come on than Emma. So thank you for joining us on this I'd call it balmy. It's kind of balmy out. Balmy early evening. So thanks, Emma. And if you want to just take it away.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks for the introduction. Hi, friends. I feel like I know most folks on the call. You know, it's nice to be among friends after wrapping up many weeks on Zoom with the legislature, and I'm very used to being recorded, so I'm just always on all the time. And I will say that I am a little under the weather. There's a stomach bug ripping through my family right now, so I'm glad the lighting's like this because I'm not looking my best right now. So I appreciate just, you know, real talk. That's the way it is, and hopefully no child comes running in. But that's, again, real talk life. I had to write a couple notes down because the session did end just on Friday, and I have to compare notes to other legislators, but it's like my brain just had to hit a hard reboot or something, and I had to remember what we actually did, specifically to really, you know, provide some insights on particularly unemployment and pensions. And I thought I'd start there first, but I'm happy to answer questions on any other topic. And, you know, I can certainly get back to you if I can't seem to dredge up the memory in my head, because a lot of bills move at the end of the session, as most people know. So it's a bit of a blur. And I also just a bit of just one more piece around my background. Before I was a legislator, I was a labor organizer for the teacher and support staff union for over a decade. So I say that because my orientation has been and will always be around working people's issues, not just those in unions, but just the general working Vermonter, and really keeping their interests in mind, which is not a majority viewpoint, I would say, on the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. And so it's been a real joy to serve there, trying to provide some alternative viewpoints and a constant refrain, frankly, not just on, you know, workers and what are we doing in terms of not just workforce development, but real workforce development that pays livable wages, professional wages, and has standards when we invest state dollars in there. But also like the other side of it, which is around, I think, a larger social justice equity lens, and really applying that into every conversation we have. So just two specific issues that Emily asked me to speak to: unemployment and pensions. I never thought I would learn so much about unemployment, but it is quite a beast of a policy issue. And the two things I'll sort of like interweave here are, I think, some of the major management issues of the Department of Labor, which is separate from the policy decisions for which the state legislature has been grappling with this past session. And so anyone who's been on unemployment, which is frankly a whole lot of Vermonters, I think there's still about 40,000 Vermonters on unemployment at the moment, and many more were at one point during this pandemic. Unfortunately, most Vermonters have interfaced with the highly understaffed and under-resourced Department of Labor as it relates to unemployment. So regardless of what you actually qualify for unemployment, your user experience has been dreadful, most likely, and I apologize to anyone on behalf of the state because we need to do a whole lot better. But to the policy piece in particular, but then that's a piece I want to come back to around the management, because I think there's something there that perhaps RAD could help with myself and a few other legislators to really hold the department accountable and the governor accountable on that management piece, because that's not going away. And every week it feels like there's another issue coming up with the mainframe, or this group of folks can't find their PIN numbers this week, or and not the user, the state suddenly can't get the website to interface and get folks that access so they can do their work search requirements, etc. So the policy issue was really an interesting one. It started with a bill called S10 from the Senate and turned into S62 towards the end of the session. And we did a couple little minor unemployment bills, so not to be confused with those, but those were really alignment bills with federal unemployment changes that were happening due to the pandemic. This one was the meatiest one because it was where the state realized, based on the current statute, that employers pay a certain rate based on how much their workforce, those that they employ, use unemployment. And so to get a rating system, basically. And unemployment is super complicated. I'm happy to geek out. I always say, with anyone who wants to go super in the weeds at some point, but I'm not going to bore you to death on how unemployment is actually calculated and all of that. All you need to know is that employers pay a tax into what funds the Unemployment Trust Fund. And that has been built on a 5-step schedule about 10, 15 years ago or so. The last time we had a major unemployment policy challenge was when the trust fund was pretty broke. And so they created what they thought was a pretty fair system between how we would rebuild that fund, which pays all the unemployment claims, by employers paying their fair share on a schedule that would change based on the health of the fund, and then employees, unemployed employees, getting, there was a freeze on unemployment claims for a while about how much those would be, and then that got lifted and some changes happened over the years. So policymakers who were around 15 years ago remembered that, and you might have heard in policy debates the grand bargain, which was this idea that, in policy, there should perhaps be equity between those workers and employers. Not a radical concept, but that became a radical concept this session, which was heartbreaking and infuriating, frankly, to be there and saying we're prioritizing 99% of this conversation on employer tax relief. And I kept using the word relief, which my chair, I think, flubbed and used at the end during our final debate on S62, which I thought was a personal win, because it is a tax relief. What we came up with the Senate came up with in S10 was a smaller version of tax relief that would alleviate a high increase in this July for employers, because when so many people basically draw down the checking account, the unemployment trust fund, it means that you have to put a whole lot more in all of a sudden, and the law didn't anticipate a pandemic, so it wasn't going to gradually refill the trust fund. So there was going to be a big tax increase in July if we did nothing. So the Senate did a modified version, and they put a modified version in for unemployed folks, which was this dependent care benefit, which 13 other states have. It's not a new concept. It's not a pandemic related concept. It basically is $50. It would have been $50 a week for folks with dependents under 18 while they're on unemployment, to help just get a little bit more income in their door to get back into the workforce. And anyone who has kids knows that you would blow through that in a second if you have a kid in diapers, or it would be less than a day of childcare if you needed to put a kid into childcare in order to go to a job interview. So this was not a major, no one's going to get rich off of this dependent benefit. When it came to the House in my committee, not only did that get stripped out of the bill, but they increased the tax relief for employers. So instead of the minimal bit that the Senate put in, not minimal, it was basically would freeze the tax rate from this current year into next year so that we could figure out what to do. Instead, the majority of my committee decided to pull the 2020 year completely out of the formula, a 10-year formula, which makes it a 10-year permanent change, which means it totaled $400 million for employers, with nothing in it for unemployed folks by the time this bill got kind of churned up and spit around. So I dissented and kept pushing. While I was one of 2 votes, it would have been 3 votes to vote against it in committee, I continue to press throughout the building, along with the Progressive Caucus, for that matter, and a few allies, progressive-leaning Democrats, to say this is not something we can do at this point. We cannot go through the pandemic and not do anything for workers who've been on unemployment and struggling. This is ridiculous that that there's no balance in this bill. So by the end, in the sort of the 11th hour, a $25 a week benefit was added back in for all UI claimants, which will start once the federal pandemic relief dollars ends around Labor Day. So, it's not as big of a win. I thought the $50 dependent care benefit was also minimal, just to be clear. I think we need to do a whole lot more, which both examining the UI system in general. Our average claim is somewhere in the middle. We do not by any means have the most generous unemployment program in the country. We're like 21st or 22nd or something ranked. So there's a whole lot more we can do, but I am proud that we were able to get something back in for workers into this bill. And that benefit should go for about at least a dozen years, maybe 15 years, because there's a total amount that was sort of attached to $100 million that could be spent. So this will be something that hopefully will become permanent policy for this enhancement on folks' unemployment claims, which hopefully only gets better once we, can have some more time to talk about the overall system and how we can be more equitable compared to other states, but just the right thing to do, frankly, in Vermont. You have a just very brief thing in there it's probably super dorky, but you all are dorky policy people if you're here on a June, and that's not June yet, May, I don't know what date it is, May, I think it's May night in Vermont. There's a report, and reports can be deadly and task force can be deadly, but this is actually a really good policy one because, as I mentioned before, the management of DOL has been so abysmally poor that this report will get not only into sort of the mechanics of making a solvent UI trust fund and right sizing how we do the taxing and what we could do for claimants, but it also distinctly writes into the bill, we need to look at the operations of DOL. We need to look at the management. We need to look at what the commissioner's powers should be around being able to kind of forgive people's overpayments, because sometimes the system overpays people because I think of the lack of capacity they have to do the accounting correctly, and staffing, most importantly, staffing. The last thing I'll just say on unemployment, because I see you all glossing over. I just spent a lot of my life on unemployment lately. That's okay. The last thing about staffing is that and I should say most, Vermont has decided to only fund staffing for the unemployment portion of the Department of Labor through what we get through the federal government. So we don't spend any Vermont dollars on staffing for the Department of Labor. So other states do that as well, but other states do decide to basically look at, what do we have to get done? Okay, how much should we get from the federal government? And then let's do a little bit more from state funds in order to adequately staff and adequately support the operations, in this case, of the unemployment program in Vermont. And we've never done that. So I think that's one of many areas that I think we need to explore, because when Vermont generally pre-pandemic has a very low unemployment figure. And when that happens, you get the lowest amount of federal dollars ever. So that means we get very few dollars to staff people to run these programs. And so we just have to ask a lot of questions, and I think do a much better job in that area. So I will pause there. The next thing I'm going to talk about is pensions, but I just want to know if anyone had any questions about unemployment or that long speech I just gave you about the Department of Labor.
No, that was great. And it's definitely been something that I've been very personally interested in, but again, policy people. But I have a question, but if anyone else has a question about unemployment, feel free to ask away first.
I had a question. Emma, thanks so much for talking about that. My question was, first, you had mentioned a report. And I was curious, if that's actually a report that people can look at, and where to find that.
Yes.
And then also my second question is, you had mentioned there's space for RAD to support that work. And I would just love to hear more from you about what you imagine, or how in particular the Burlington chapter can, and chapters in general across the state can organize and support.
Yeah, great question, Sophie. Thanks for bringing my brain back to that point about how RAD and others can collaborate in the summer. So first, the report. So the report is due back, I believe it's November, and timing's everything, so that we have time to read it and respond to it and build bills for next session, the last part of the biennium here. So that will come out in November. It will be a public document. I don't trust the Department of Labor is going to necessarily put that on the front page of their website, to be honest, but it is supposed to be sent to all members of the House Commerce Committee. So I'll certainly get a copy. And, I have to believe, and I'll send it to the media as well, that with all of the mistakes, problems, hiccups, whatever word you want to choose, my less generous days, I have more stronger words to use, that the Department of Labor has been doing. I have to believe that this is going to be one of the top reports, the media will also be looking for. But November is the answer on that. And there will also be a task force of legislators and folks within the Department of Labor. And there's also an independent economist who's going to be working through the state auditor's office to oversee this whole thing. So one has to believe that the state auditor, being Doug Hoffer, will do a better job than just leaving it up to the Department of Labor. That was important, that, basically somebody who's not doing the best job shouldn't be left to evaluate themselves and come up with solutions on how to do a better job, frankly. So I'm sure that Hoffer will also be promoting the outcome of this particular study. So stay tuned. And I'm sure those meetings are public. So if you really want to dork out this summer, you can look for their probably half a dozen meetings or so that they'll be doing. And to the point of how to organize. So, I know I'm not the only legislator, and frankly, I'm starting to get contacted from folks not even in my district about just the ongoing chronic issues of not getting their claims paid, or everything's going on fine, and then all of a sudden it goes up. People can't access it anymore, or the work search requirement, you couldn't enter into the website. I mean, these things are just chronic. So I am really at the point where I'm personally starting to think about how to put together a coalition to call for Commissioner Harrington to be fired, frankly, at this point, because there's been so many mistakes and so many moments of mismanagement. And I also think that, his leadership is questionable, given, you probably all read the media. If you watch one time he testifies in House Commerce, it's very condescending kind of leadership. Not only to he protects, I think, the Department of Labor staff, which I appreciate, but then there's such a condescension around talking about unemployed Vermonters and what Vermonters are experiencing. And I think that kind of leadership is a really poor reflection on the governor, and I think there needs to be more done around accountability there. So in terms of organizing, I think there's something there around some sort of accountability, making sure the governor's a piece of that, because of course he's an appointee of the governor. And there's been years of just poor decision making. It wasn't just the pandemic. It's just the pandemic really peeled back, I think, the bigger story, and revealed the bigger story. So there you go, Sophie.
I have a question about and thanks for your report, Emma, and for serving for our district. So a year ago, when people were having all these issues, and apparently the issues are still creeping up, and I second what you just said about the commissioner, they talked about the mainframe, the computer, that being from the 70s or whatever. So is there a plan to update that? Has it been updated, or?
Another good question. So separate from, sort of the cascade of problems and the constant, if I hear the answer, we can't do that because of the mainframe, one more time, I think I'm going to reach through the Zoom screen and just like shake Commissioner Harrington by the shoulders, because it's like not good enough. It's just frankly not good enough. And so long before that, so early in the session when we were setting sort of our budget priorities from the House Commerce, that was one of the pieces is updating the mainframe for Department of Labor. And it's a multi-million-dollar investment. It's going to take like 2 to 3 years, apparently. So the money was earmarked and is moving forward, the first phase of it. Also in this report I mentioned is or maybe it might be in budget language, but either way, there is an intentionality of making sure that as a first year legislator, I'm gonna mess up this committee name, but I'm sure no one knows it either. There's a committee of oversight of technology, apparently, whenever big technology programs are implemented in the state, no matter what agency or department it is. And so that entity oversees like these big IT upgrades that happen. And so there's an intentionality to align the recommendations of this unemployment related report with the mainframe update phase 1 work, so that it's not being done in like separate silos, basically, which I think is incredibly important. So as they're designing like all that stuff you do usually I remotely know around like phasing in a whole new website or a whole new it's really back end database piece. What do you need in terms of the user's experience? That will be all incredibly important to tie in with what they're learning from the Department of Labor. And remember, before the pandemic, people couldn't even file unemployment in Vermont online. I mean, before the pandemic, that's how antiquated we were even before this whole thing started. And the last thing I'll just say on that is that at one point we had testimony from She was representing NELP, which is the National Employment Labor Project, they're great. They're like a social justice organization nationally that works on employment law stuff, specifically unemployment, which there's not a lot of advocates out there. So great resource organization. And she had just left her position as the unemployment director in Kansas. It was Kansas, I think it was Kansas. And she said their mainframe was older than Vermont's, and they still were able to make transition and changes that Vermont was not able to do. And along the way, I know Rhode Island moved everything into a cloud and was able to kind of change things as well in real time during the pandemic. So it's really, I think, misleading to keep blaming the mainframe as the reason why all of this is happening. Sorry, I can go on forever about the mainframe, but down with the mainframe, but as the excuse. So thanks, Monica.
Yeah, that's troubling. I know from working at the State House, I've dealt with a lot of troubling technology related things and some things that need to be updated, from even just the microphones in the chamber to various things, very outdated and be hard. My question, and I asked this at our South Burlington Ledge Forum on Monday, but no one of our four serve on that committee. But and this is a difficult one, and something I've been thinking a lot about. I'm curious if the legislature can do anything about our workforce and the issues of struggling to find people to work at small businesses and restaurant jobs right now. I have a few friends that own restaurants across Vermont and can't even stay open right now because they don't have people who will work. And, they're offering, anywhere from $16 to $25 an hour plus tips, which seems appropriate for those jobs. And I'm just wondering, Representative Townsend, who serves on appropriations, discussed that, there's money going into training programs for people who want to, switch careers and maybe, things like that, or to the businesses. But I'm just curious, and, like I said, I've been thinking about it and I don't know the answer. But anyone who is vaccinated and has been out to eat can see the look of stress on people's faces who are two people waiting on a room full of customers, and whether the management or restaurants decide to close because they don't have enough staff or keep running the staff ragged. Is there anything, this is something that hasn't happened before, but is there anything that the legislature can do to kind of help that? Or is it just something that has to work itself out? I don't know if you could touch on that a little bit, but it's very concerning, seeing that situation going on right now.
Sure. Thanks, Emily. Well, workforce is part of the charge of House Commerce. And we admittedly didn't do a ton, or at least not in a strategic way, I would say. Like, I don't know, as an organizer, I sort of make these false assumptions that we're going to have like a coordinated conversation about all workforce, and we're going to have like a workforce related bill. And instead it was all these little tiny piecemeal pieces around some money here for, scholarships through VSAC for state colleges for folks to finish their degrees. These things you probably heard Representative Townsend talk a little bit about, or apprenticeship programs here or there, or trying to put something into the broadband bill, which is all well and good, but it's literally like you have to like hunt and peck and find it all in different bills and the budget and whatnot. And it's not in some sort of like coordinated storytelling kind of way to say, this is what we're doing for the workforce in Vermont in some sort of, again, coordinated and thoughtful strategic way, to not only, understand what Vermonters need, if it is upskilling or education, or if it is really looking at some of the more, I think, systemic issues. And I'm glad to hear that your friends pay those kind of wages. That is not probably I don't think that is the reality of most service industry jobs, of course. So that's one of them. But I think that is a piece of when we look at economic relief grants, or when we look at things that the state has been doing the last 12 months or so related to the pandemic, so trying to keep these businesses afloat, I personally think it's important to have some sort of wage standards, right? Because it's one thing to get people to work, but people shouldn't be having to work 2 to 3 jobs in order to meet their basic needs. Like, that is also not sustainable and not healthy and not right. So, part of it's that. Part of it is also, I think, really figuring out where regionally the need is for workforce development, because I think I like some of this thinking where there's, they do, again, reports, everything with reports, Department of Labor, again, does these reports around where the most need is in terms of sectors and types of jobs in the state. And I think understanding that information more would help the state put together a more strategic bit of policy. And I asked this a couple times during the end of the session. Apparently that will be one of our priorities in House Commerce, is to start really drilling into workforce development, making a sort of coordinated thing. I got sort of a little bit of a chuckle. Oh, you first year legislator, we've been talking about this for 10 years, like trying to put a coordinated thing together, and they still haven't done it. So hopefully that will be a thing that I can help bring forward, because as I said, workers and working people's issues are really my lens. And so stay tuned for 2022. There wasn't a whole lot of like directly done, I would say, just to be more specific to your answer, Emily. That's why people can't answer you.
No, that's right. I know
Yeah.
everyone, and yeah, they touched on what you were saying about grants and things like that. But yeah, it is hard, and yeah, I guess we'll stay tuned. They're struggling and whatnot. Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks.
And the one other thing I would just say, Emily, is I think the other reality that I know all of you know is people have to feel safe to return to work, and also have childcare and make sure their kids are safe. And there's plenty of situations where people are not ready to return to the workforce for a whole host of reasons. And so that's another reality put into the mix. And then, part of this unemployment thing is that just, I mean, not saying all employers do this by any means, but employers have to also rehire and make room for people to come back in, give them the shifts that, and the whole other bill that never even got touched was around that I was a co-sponsor for. I can't remember now, it's like ancient history, but looking at reliable schedules and looking at really trying to make sure that folks, and this is especially into the service industry and restaurant industry, reliable schedules alone and requiring that of employers would make that industry so much more sustainable, because now not all, but many have a very erratic schedule where you don't necessarily know 1 week from the other what you're working, and how can you have children or work a second job if you need to, or go to school or have a life, if that's the case. So there's these other pieces that I think are all part of the mosaic, the puzzle to put together for workforce.
It's true. I actually just had a friend who had worked at a restaurant and through the pandemic and left for something else because of the erratic schedule situation. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, of course, that's very true. And then I had another friend today. Now I'm just talking about my friends, but her husband decided that he's not going back to work and is going to do the childcare, so that it saved money. I mean, so he'll be, stay-at-home dad, because it's just they can't make it work, and it's unfortunate. And I also think that for some people I've talked to, and I know for me, when I think about things, is having healthcare. So if that was out of the equation, people would feel more comfortable in certain jobs where they didn't have that provided. So that's great. Well, thank you for that. So yeah, if you want to touch on, so the pensions, I know a lot of people on this call have done some things with that, and been, Josh and been on the lines, and really that was one of the most, at the forefront issues in the legislature. So if you just want to talk about kind of where we're at now and where we can go from here with that, that'd be great.
Sure. So that was probably the other big issue that the Progressive Caucus was really trying to push the conversation consistently and loudly, and just trying to also provide realistic alternatives, because it's one thing to just say no, it's another to actually formulate other ideas and do some truth speaking, I think, throughout that process. So as folks might remember, just very quickly in the beginning of the session, there was a great sense of urgency and this narrative, I will say, I don't think it's true, but narrative that there was an emergency, that the pension funds for state employees and teachers were underfunded, which is true, but there was at an emergency, like Mach 5 level, lights are flashing, we must do something immediately, and it must be harsh and big and dramatic and quick, and we must do it mostly on the backs of workers. And that's just like in the no-fly zone for myself and the progressives, of course, to say that is completely the wrong approach, and that does not have good process, let alone the right solution. So through a lot of back and forth throughout the session, and a lot of Vermonters came to public hearings and reached out. It was the number one issue I heard about, and I know that's the same for other legislators, far and beyond childcare, far and beyond unemployment, individual issues, even pensions were by far what I heard the most from my constituents around. Do not put this on the back of workers, find another way. And so a few things, I'm a member of the Workers Caucus, and a few things that I think are still in works, because basically what came out of the session is a task force a task force that is going to study this whole issue. And the Senate, thankfully, is a more progressive body, and they made sure the task force was balanced in its membership. So when it came out of the House, it was imbalanced, that it gave more folks who are either formally management or attached to the state government and or our legislators, which I believe we are management. We do, vote on things like the Pay Act for state employees. Like, we are, by extension, management. We're not neutral on this train here. And it was in balance where workers who were actually going to be impacted by the pensions had the minority seats on this task force. So anything that would come out of it, they always would have no chance, even if they voted as a block, to be able to oppose anything that goes into this report that the task force is putting together. So that got rebalanced in the Senate, and now it's 50-50. It's split between workers and management. So that's critical in terms of what they produce. And the other thing, again, a little policy geeky, is that the scope of the work was very narrow when it came out of the House. So it was so narrow that they were actually saying down to the letter, look at defined benefit plans versus defined contribution plans or hybrid plans, and literally like sort of scripting the way for the recommendations to come back to basically, in my view, do most, if not all, of what they originally proposed in the beginning of the session. So it's kind of a little bit of a farce. And so the Senate zoomed out a bit more, made the scope a little bit more flexible, which I think will allow some more dialogue to happen. I'm still concerned about the timeline. They're supposed to bring this back now by October. It used to be September, but by October it's still super fast to have these folks, state employees and teachers and supports. I mean, it's teachers actually, and not the support staff pension, but have been on the front lines and are essential workers, and they are exhausted. And to suddenly now do this massive pension, exploration, if you will, of a task force, and have 12 meetings between now and October, it's just like an awful timing. And I think it's just a very fast, compressed, not great for a process kind of setup. So it will be something that hopefully RAD can help promote out those hearings whenever they have them, so that it's not done when we're all like, sort of blurry-eyed during the summer. We're trying to just, I don't know, come out of this COVID cloud we've all been living in. All this very important work is going to be happening during this period of time. So we've got to keep our eye on it. And I guess, and I'm happy to go into the details of what the former proposals were, but I think the biggest thing folks just need to remember is that there is no emergency. There's plenty of money in the pension funds right now. We have time to put a thoughtful set of policy recommendations together, and we have to be courageous. It's a moment for courageous, leadership to look at different revenue sources. We have a promise to public sector workers, and we're going to have a major issue around retention and recruitment, which is going to be a whole other cost to the state. Not that individual, these are human beings, let's be clear, but it's also a cost to the state when we can't fund staff, state employee positions in their vacancies, or teaching positions in their vacancies, because our pension system goes in the toilet and it's no longer something someone can retire on. Why in the world would they ever take a job in the state of Vermont? So I think we really have to be more thoughtful about it, whatever comes back. But let's just be clear, I think the real fight's going to be in 2022 with whatever comes out of, in terms of the bill that gets generated out of this task force. So stay tuned.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful that, we have people like you there that are fighting for working people, and people like this issue is very obviously important to me. My mom was a teacher for 45 years and, worked till her 70s until she couldn't anymore. And and my father was a teacher as well. And it's just, yeah. Okay, well, that's really helpful. One question that I had and was brought up at our South Burlington Legislative Forum is who the legislators are that are going to be on the task force committee. Those have not been decided yet, as that's what Representative Lalonde said. The governor is the one who picks who goes on that. Is that correct, or someone else?
I thought it was the Speaker and Senate Pro Tem. I mean, there's three from each body. Now I'm getting lost in my memory of the different configurations. But I will say there was an interesting moment of debate between the conferees, so the conference committee members from the Senate and the House, about these legislator seats, no matter the number and who appoints it, around whether they all have to be from different parties or not, and whether or not progressives will get a seat. And I don't think we will be getting a seat, and we'll probably be the last to know when folks get appointed. But they have to meet like basically 12 times between now and October. So I'm sure the appointments will happen in the next week or two, because I have to get to work.
Yeah, no, we'll stay tuned for that. I know some people on our call were interested in that in South Burlington. Josh, I don't know if you're with us or stepped away, but did you want to talk about pensions at all or have any questions for Emma? I know you've been doing a lot of work on that. Maybe Josh stepped away. Well, thank you so much for touching on that. And yeah, I guess we'll stay tuned to see how that goes. And it was definitely something that I was glued to my, oh, that's fine. Yeah, no worries. But yeah, no, there's definitely something that I was following very closely this year and very important to me. And my mom's colleagues and my mom is still in the NEA and whatnot. So thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions about pensions for Emma or anything they can do? Is there anything I guess it's kind of now, yeah, this is a very tight timeline. So.
Well, a general question I have is I sort of mind dump everything from the session about like what to work now on in the summer and the fall. In terms of RAD structure, you have a Burlington chapter and a Chittenden County chapter. I mean, what would be the best way to stay
Sure.
in collaboration? And
yeah, we're Essex has their own. So, but yeah, I mean, I definitely would love to promote any stuff on pensions within the group and send some stuff out, anything we can do to help or support state employees and teachers and on that. Great.
And I'll just do a little plug about just issues that fall outside of organized labor issues, because obviously the NEA and VSCA are doing their best to organize for their members, but issues like unemployment, or when we talked before about like reliable work schedules, that's a boatload of Vermonters who don't have an organized voice in the State House. So that would be a great place when those kind of issues come up again, which I'm certainly going to be trying to push forward as much as possible next session. It would be great to collaborate on some of those workers' issues, because they do not have advocates there. And it is really important to just have an amplifier, even if you can just help get the word out that, hey, this topic is not going anywhere. We need some pressure on House Commerce, for example, to take this bill off the wall. And that's the kind of collaboration that would be awesome, because there's just a really underrepresented voice in the House and the Senate.
It's true. No, that's great. I'm totally down for that. And you're right. And I think a lot of people lose faith in engaging in the system because they feel so left behind as a working Vermonter that doesn't have a union behind them. So that's a real problem. And I'd love to stay in touch about that. Okay, well, so now you are on summer break, and then according to my, right, and then like I'm sure you're ready to hit the beach and party with this, right?
I'm sorry, what?
Right. But and then so as far as I think I know, you guys there's the veto session coming in June. Is that what's happening?
There's two more times we're convening, and so there's 2 days in the last full week. It's June 20 something. 2 days for the veto sessions. There's only one bill vetoed so far, as far as I know. And then we also have a week scheduled in October to come back if necessary to help respond to more federal related legislation that we need to align and vote on, and maybe we did in the beginning of this session, for example, like a mini budget adjustment bill. So there might be something else like that they're anticipating. And so October will be the next time we come back in. And one other thing I'll just note, because this flew under the radar, just in terms of Vermonter accessibility to the building, there's gonna be a lot of changes to the State House. Again, if you can't sleep at night and you want to read like all these random reports that are up there's a whole report around, there you go, Emily. And I could tell you where this is because it's not really obvious, but there's a whole report on what to do with the space known as the State House, because even before the pandemic, anybody who had spent any time in that building knows it's a pretty sick building, meaning its air quality is low. It's your sardine cans in these committee rooms. It's not a healthy building for people to work in. So it's going to look different. It's going to look different physically. They're going to move committees out, break down walls. They're going to move committees into some of the old historic mansions that the state owns around the campus, if you will, the complex, just to spread people out. And the most important thing is they want to, or they will have a commitment, I've heard this so far, a commitment to make sure that there's continued accessibility electronically. I sound so old. Technology-wise, for folks to be able to still interface and watch committees in real time via Zoom, so you don't have to be at the State House for stuff, which I think is incredibly important. And the IT staff has been working unbelievably hard for the last, I don't even know how many months at this point. And so they are continuing to dig deep and figure out how to support that in all ways possible. So it's going to be a very different State House, which I think is a good thing for Vermonters to be able to get in there to access, but to keep this piece of it for folks who can't drive to Montpelier or don't have time or want to watch it recorded. This is all stuff that had never been done before. And I think it has provided a lot of important transparency and accountability, as we don't have time to probably go into this, but I'm sure you've seen some of my colleagues, they deserve some accountability around how they talk about Vermonters and certain issues. So stay tuned for that.
Totally. And I know working in Zuckerman's office, you know, it's very difficult for people to come who work and want to come. You know, we had coffee hours and lunchtime town halls and things like that, but it's so hard for people. So I know for myself, who does want to stay engaged and watch certain committees, it's been so great to be able at like 8 p.m. to look at what happened during the day and follow that and rewind and no, it's been great. And I'm glad that will still be involved in. I can also attest to the Petri dish environment of the State House colds, and a lot of people are older there, and it's very not the cleanest environment for sickness. So that is a problem. Well, that's good. And yeah, I'm glad that you guys will be able to go back and you know, I know that's been hard for some people, and so that's really great. And I look forward to visiting at some point myself. Well, thank you so much. And oh, I have one other question for you. So since you are what would you say, is it the vice chair? Is that what your title is at for the
I'm the magical assistant caucus leader.
Oh,
No,
assistant
I think
caucus.
assistant caucus leader. Yeah.
Assistant caucus leader, yes. And you have a
progressive
spot.
I do a parking spot, which I've been to once for a protest on pensions, but you know,
right.
details.
That's always coveted, the parking spots. So does the Progressive Caucus have like a couple priorities that they're kind of gearing up or that we can kind of hear about that are happening?
That's a great question. We did do a sort of a biennium press conference earlier in the session to sort of do some outlining of kind of our priorities, and we still need to debrief and kind of reshuffle. We've actually been able to advance some of these pieces, not to the full fruition for which we really want around racial justice and equity issues. But I have to say, for a caucus of 7, this is where people always laugh at me. Start using like athletic analogies and I fall flat super fast. So like we fight above our weight, or we punch above our weight, or something like that. Like we're a pretty powerful bunch, if I do say so myself, for being 7 people in a body of 150 around, and not on every committee even. So we are really having to hustle and build relationships and be really strategic about when and how we put you know, amendments and alternative thoughts in there, and what roles we play in our own committees to really move the dial, if you will, on these issues. So in particular, I just want to note a couple of my colleagues. Representative Taylor Small from Winooski is amazing, and she was able to advance along with Representative Mari Corus a bill that the trans gay panic defense bill, which is historic. Not every state even has this law, and you know, so many people said, I can't even believe this isn't a thing that's illegal, but it prevents a defendant from being able to use that as part of their defense, that they sort of had this moment where they didn't realize, that they perceived, whether it be right or wrong, that the person was gay, trans, etc., and therefore that's the reason why they did the crime against that person. And Taylor just had amazing leadership in that, and I don't think that bill, frankly, would have even seen the light of day if Taylor wasn't there and had that strong progressive voice behind it, and her advancing it all the way through, especially on the Senate side. And Representative Heather Supernaut is another first-year amazing organic farmer, badass farmer woman down in Barnard. She advanced a raw milk bill, which I think is really kind of important. I mean, sometimes ag is not an issue that progressives wrap around. I mean, besides Dave Zuckerman, but even so, like sometimes it's a little bit of a disconnect. And she got that passed in her first session and just really did an amazing job of advancing this forward, despite such a resistance. I'm learning a lot about agriculture, and I'm not by any means an expert, but there's a protectionism around dairy, old school dairy, and everything else over here. And everything else is kind of like really the way more sustainable practices and the ways that we should really be thinking about investing in the agricultural future of Vermont in ways that are supportive of our environments and supportive of smaller farmers and farmers who do not have generational wealth to buy farms and to actually do the things they want to do. For example, selling raw milk, and really picking apart it's pretty antiquated policies that sort of are barriers for people being able to, put a farm business together and to run it in a way that really has good human practices, but environmental practices as well. So she's been another amazing leader. So we can get back to you on our debrief because I think the dust is still falling. We all need to take a break from talking to each other for about a week. So stay tuned.
Yeah, that's great. And I will agree that and what Josh said too, the Progressive Caucus has been incredible and a lot of new folks and some really awesome stars there. So, well, thank you so much, Emma. Does anyone, before we wrap up that portion, have any other questions for Emma? I know we will be in contact with her about things as they progress. And, but yeah, does anyone have any questions for Emma?
I'll stick my email in the chat. And so let's be in touch for some organizing. Thanks.
Yeah,
all.
thanks so much. We're so grateful to have a voice like yours at the State House for sure. We definitely need more younger working people, allies, and working mothers at the State House for sure. It's definitely lacking. So thank you so much. All right, so now we are going to hear from lovely Sophie with a RAD update and some summer excitement.
Yeah, that was so great. And that was so full to have both Brenda, you starting us off, and Emma, that was so comprehensive and yeah, exciting to hear that. So excited about that. And it's 6:35 and I know we were planning only to go to 6:30. So I sort of rethinking how we want to use this time. Then just, I feel like we're going to have some brainstorm session. I feel like we're a little bit late for that, but what we can do, I can just give you an overview of what our summer engagement plan is. And then maybe we can talk more in June about this. And of course, I'm always available if you have follow-up questions or want to think more about this stuff before then. But so basically just wanted to share, we're having these conversations with chapters across the state about what we're planning to do this summer. So as more and more people are getting vaccinated, comfortability about being with each other is going up, we're starting to have conversations about doing some in-person, in real life canvassing in a COVID safe way, using QR codes, but doing some door knocking for folks who might be interested in that. So really the focus of the summer is going to be having conversations with people about the issues that we're going to be working on, particularly this next legislative session. So, and we want to be meeting people where they're at to be having these conversations. So that means, walking neighborhoods, meeting renters, meeting houseless folks, meeting folks who are food insecure, really having these real conversations, these organizing conversations to bring more people into the work. And so I'm going to stick this little one pager that outlines that in the chat for you to check out. So that really outlines the plan. We're going to have, so really May and June is going to be a lot of research. So like identifying who and where do we need to be having these conversations, who with and where do we need to be putting ourselves. And we're really relying on chapters to help us figure out, RAD staff, we're only so many, you in your communities know where to go. And so really relying on folks to really identify those key places. And then I think we actually are going to be doing this July 1, a Canvas training. And then July through September, we're going to be doing canvassing. And for some folks, that might be working on the phone still. For some folks, that might be knocking on doors. For some people who are really excited about script development, we have someone on staff who is fabulous with deep canvassing and has been working really intensely on a cool script that we're going to be adapting and evolving as we move through the canvas, which is really exciting. So if you get really nerdy about scripts, you can be a part of that script adaptation process too. There's like really a place for everyone. So with that said, I'm also going to throw into the chat, this is, as I said, in May and June, we're going to be putting our brainstorms together across the state. What do we know about our communities so that we can go to those places, so that we can be having honest, real, encouraging, heart conversations with people, so that we can be moving people, so that we're all pulling in the same direction. So in there, I have this Google form, which is, if you could just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes more to go through that and share what you know, share your knowledge, and submit that form. That would just be really helpful. And again, if you have questions or if you want to have a follow-up conversation with me, I'm going to put my email in the chat. I realize I didn't introduce myself. So for folks who don't know me, like my name is Sophie, and I'm the Leadership Development Coordinator at RAD on the Vermont side. And so my role with the chapters is to support amazing chapter leaders like Emilie, to make sure that our chapters have what they need, make sure that we're all coordinated, et cetera, in our work in different areas of the state. So that's what I've got, and it looks like we're only 9 minutes over. But I do want to see if anyone has questions, like here and now. I'm available to hear what you got.
Well, maybe, sorry, I was gonna say, and we will do another pitch and discussion in the June meeting. Maybe it'll be a rainy day and more people will come.
I have a question, but I'm not a member of the chapter. So is that okay?
Heck yes, yeah.
Oh
We
yeah.
we don't actually have a chapter down here, so I'm a member of all the chapters. But I am wondering if we as RAD are going to name that people are going to have some, not just discomfort coming out, but some serious mental health challenges coming out. It just seems appropriate in Mental Health Awareness Month. Coming out of this, because personally, I'll just speak personally, I have severe anxiety. And one of the things that I like to do is not leave my house. And for 15 months, I have not had to leave my house. And now, but before I had to, and it would get me places. So a lot of people are always surprised to find that out because I do things so publicly. But if I keep going, I don't end up in that inertia issue. But I have it now. And so I'm assuming that there's other people with other mental health issues that are going to have real challenges. And I'm wondering if as RAD, we're going to do any kind of development around humanness that is going to come out right now, so that we're not just pretending that everything is going to go back to normal, like we've been saying all along can't happen.
Yeah, I think that's really important to remember. Totally, that's very relatable. I mean, this is my little office room. Like I'm in here all day long, every day. I think we should talk more about that, what that could look like. And Brenda, would love to hear more from you. Maybe we could chat sometime about, would love to hear more about what your thoughts are. And if other people here have thoughts about what that could look like, yeah, would love to stay in contact about that. That's great.
I would happily set up a meeting and chat about it. I think it's really important for us to center it.
Let's do it.
Very true. It's hard. I went to something today with some former coworkers in person, and it was like just such a different experience. It was nice to see people's smiles and see them in person, but it's just like, oh, hey. It was definitely interesting, and hugging and whatnot. But yeah, no, a lot of people are struggling with that same stuff. So I totally understand. And maybe Wyndham needs their own chapter, I guess. I think there's a Bennington chapter, but that's not the same. But
To be clear, I'm cool with just like floating around chapters. That's
Sure,
not
yeah.
my item. So
Yeah, totally. Well, you're always welcome at this chapter meeting anytime, of course. We would love to have you. Okay, well, does anyone else have anything that they're working on or wanna bring up? Oh, there is one other thing for Burlington residents. No one here, though, I believe, is in Ward 3, but they are having a special election in August. So, you know, stay tuned to see kind of what that shapes up to look like, and if there's candidates that strike interest to support, and what's going to happen there. Obviously, the council is losing an incredible person. But last night, as they said, the council's loss is the city's gain. Having Councillor Pine as the CETO director is going to be amazing for the city. So I'm very excited for him about that. But yeah, so we'll see what that turns out to be, because we want to make sure that have someone that aligns with values that are important to that ward. So, okay, well, does anyone else have anything they want to add before we close out until June?
So there's a city council seat open for Ward 3.
Right, yeah, because Brian, oh, yeah. Councillor Pine stepped down last night because he is going
Moreau
to,
appointed him to CETO.
right. So there will be a
Interesting.
special election, and Monica, I know you know all about special elections because we did work on Ollie's campaign
Yes.
that first time in August for that. So yeah, there'll be a special election in August. So stay tuned, and hopefully we can support a candidate.
We need another progressive
Right.
because we can't lose that progressive seat. And special elections are awesome because we can all put our efforts into it. You know, like town meeting day, you have all these candidates running. But on special election, like when Ali Jang ran, he was I mean, that was kind of lucky because like all RAD people were there helping him. I mean, he had all forces behind him.
Right.
So
No, it's very important. We want to keep that seat to be aligned with those values for sure.
interesting news.
Yep. But yeah, so that will be important, especially given the seats on, you know, how close it is with voting and whatnot as well. So, yep. All right. Well, thanks so much for everyone for coming and for spending your balmy Wednesday evening with us. It's nice to see. I'm really familiar with everyone and have done some working with all of y'all. And thank you so much. And yeah, Nick, that's awesome. I know you're a superstar on campaigns and organizing, and it's awesome to see you. I think the last time I was at Dave's farm for yeah. It's good. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good night, and thanks for coming.
Good to see everyone.
Bye.
Nice meeting everyone.